It's Saturday and it's 2 days before Christmas, but I need to stop today and process these two-gallon Ziplocs full of greens that I picked from my yard and I've got ready to process. I've got them julienned and I'm fixing to boil them for 5 minutes and get them canned up today because I have a whole lot more to go. So after Christmas, I've got a lot more to process. The greens that you saw me cooking in the kitchen a while ago were taken from a variety of greens around my yard, such as these mustard greens, my rutabaga leaves that are in my sugar kettle, my Chinese mishahili cabbage, which I kind of scalped, but I left enough to where it'll cut and come again. It'll grow back, hopefully. That's what it did before. I have a good many of those over there, so hopefully I'll still be able to get a lot of that. I also took some tatsoi that I have growing. I took a good bit of my Siberian kale that I have. I thinned it out, but I still have a lot left that I can use. I thinned out some pak choi that I have growing and threw some leaves of those all up in there. And I thinned out my red giant mustard greens. Today I brought my wash tubs out here, and from my greens I'm going to be selecting from these two rows over here, which are Florida broadleaf mustard greens. And this long row here is 7-top turnip greens. So I want to mix a lot of those turnip greens in with the other greens. Sometimes the turnip greens to me are not the best tasting, but I like them. But when you mix them in with all the other greens, it all becomes a good flavored dish. So I want to kind of mix a lot of these greens together to can them. I kind of wanted to do a chit chat from my mustard green patch up there and kind of talk while I was working, but the sun is very bright in that spot right now. It's not good for filming, and the traffic it's a Saturday, but the traffic is going crazy out there. So I thought I'd kind of come to my backyard where it's a little bit more mild. It's a windy day. That may or may not affect this video and the sound. I'm sorry if it's a little bit windy. I'm using today a little tripod camera holder that my son and his girlfriend got me for Christmas. Opened it last night, so it is so handy. It's holding my phone right now. I can adjust the height however I want to, and it's got a tripod at the bottom. So one of the best gifts ever. I appreciate it so much. What I kind of wanted to talk about today is not just canning greens and how many greens can you get out of this much or that much. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about prioritizing foods, even foods that we may not love, just love them. You know, there's certain foods that you really crave and you want and you desire out of your gardens. Some foods you won't even plant because you don't want them, you don't like them. You tasted them when you were little and you didn't like them or anything, and you just don't want to plant them. But today I just kind of wanted to address that. Now, I'm not perfect at it, but I wanted to address it because I think there's things I can take from this. There's things you might can take from this, and I think now is the time to kind of talk about it, because as soon as the Christmas holidays are over and we get into the new year, everybody starts thinking about what they're going to plant. And if you have specific planting areas, then you start assigning so many feet to this or that, and some of these things might just some plants you don't really love may just drop off your radar. But I want you to think about what I'm going to say just a little bit before you get into that final planting for the spring. It's not even too late, depending on where you live, to plant some things for the fall, or for the winter, I guess, like collard greens and things that still can grow even in these cold temperatures. Depending on where you live, do your research, see what your neighbors have grown and everything. But there's things I can still throw out here in my yard here in South Louisiana that can take off and grow, spinach and things like that. So it's kind of open your mind about the possibilities. But today I'm kind of going to use greens. I'm just going to catch all greens as my inroad, I guess you would say, to what I'm wanting to say. And when I say greens, I'm talking about kale, mustard greens, collard greens, 7-top turnip greens, regular turnip greens of any variety. The tops on a lot of plants are edible and can be canned and everything, and or frozen, julienned, kind of blanched and frozen. They can be used in recipes or whatever, and they tend to get overlooked. Radish tops, kohlrabi tops, things like that. A lot of people will harvest the turnips and throw the leaves to their chickens and all, which is fine. You know, do what you got to do. But a lot of times these greens can be used, can be cooked, and can be put away for later. And I just don't want people to miss those opportunities to put some vitamins on their shelves in their pantry or in their freezer, however you put it up. I'm going to probably say more pantry because I do a lot of canning of things like this. So I just thought I'd bring it up. Now, this is 2 days before Christmas. This might not be a video that you'd expect me to put out 2 days before Christmas. I could be showing other things or doing other things or just doing a Merry Christmas video or whatever. But sometimes I feel like God puts things on my heart, and until I kind of let them go in through my mind and process them out verbally, sometimes they tend to stay on my heart and kind of eat at me. And I picked some greens a few days ago, and I was able to get in there that night, and it took me a good while. Greens are not easy to process because they can get kind of dirty and everything. So it took me a while, but I sat at my kitchen sink and I cleaned them really good in 2 or 3 batches of water in my sink. I rinsed them really good, and then I had my cutting board out and I cut spines out of different things and just eventually rolled them into little rolls and kind of julienned them. And I was able to fill two 2-gallon Ziplocs, the big jumbo 2-gallon Ziplocs. I was able to fill 2 of those, so 4 gallons of greens, just off of a picking I did in the evening that wasn't even that extensive, and it didn't wear me out that much or anything. I filled up, I think, both of my metal pans that I just showed a while ago, both of those, and then I filled up the first one full and came and dumped it on my cabinet, went back out and filled both pans and brought those in. So that was 3 pans worth of greens, and it made 4 gallons of greens that I'm putting up today. So I was surprised of just how little of a dent I put in my greens when I did that. I was surprised at how little of a dent I put in them. I still have tons of greens out here. So if that made 4 gallons, I can guarantee you I have 10 gallons more out here I haven't picked. And I'm starting on that today. I'm gonna just keep rolling. I don't wanna lose these greens. They'll have time to grow back, some of them. The ones that do, they'll grow back. I might get more later. But I'm not gonna waste any of this. And that's what's been sitting on my heart, and that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Some stories just came to my mind from past experiences, and I just thought, okay, these stories are coming to my mind, and I'm picking these greens, and not to be a Debbie Downer, but I watch a lot of projections for our economy and things like that, and I've brought all this up before. Everybody has their opinion on things, but I'm a watcher of a lot of that stuff, and I'm just seeing that the game is almost up. That's my opinion. That's what I'm preparing for. I have always had this mantra that if you prepare for things and you're wrong, what are you losing? You're not losing really anything. If I have a full stocked pantry and our investments and everything go kaplunk, we eat. If I have no debt because we've worked really hard to be debt free and to not have credit cards and to not owe anybody anything, and our investments go kerplunk, I don't owe anybody anything. You know, what are you losing to be prepared? What is it that stops people from being prepared for bad times coming? Just because it hadn't happened yet to some people they have. I know people right now that are struggling. But just because it's not a Great Depression where we have soup lines everywhere, or do we? Do we even really pay attention to that anymore? I think we probably have the most homelessness in the history of America going on right now. But we don't have that visual of a soup line, so we don't think about it. But a lot of the signs are there already. They're there. The average price of a median home now is $414,000, averaged out across America. $414,000. How many of your kids that are just wanting to get married, or that are just getting out of college, or what have you, how many of them can jump into a $414,000 house right now? I know mine would struggle with it. Mine would struggle with it. We were actually talking about that last night a little bit, and I just told them, I said, just don't buy right now. You know, I feel like the market of housing is going to tank in the not too near future. I think you would do better to hold off and buy during a tank than you would to buy right now. So, but it makes you think, when we think the economy is doing so great sometimes, and yet the average median price of a house in the United States of America is $414,000. And that's not because houses are now built better and are worth more. That's because the value of the US dollar is going down. And it costs more to buy things now than you could buy them a few months ago, a few years ago. And as long as it's not us having to go out and buy a $414,000 house, then we think, well, things are cruising along and everything's okay. But we know they're not. We know they're not. We know what we're paying at the grocery store. We know what we're paying for your everyday things like homeowners insurance and all those things that are kind of just ratcheting up. Property taxes ratcheting up. And it's being more and more of a squeeze put on everybody to get by. So what does this have to do with mustard greens and greens? It's made me think of, like I said, two stories from days gone by. One story that keeps coming to my mind, and I may have told this story on a video, I don't know when, year and a half ago. If you've heard it, please bear with me. If not, I think it'll hit you like it hit me. But I was listening to a woman talk to a group of students, and this woman was a survivor of the Holocaust. She had been in one of the concentration camps. She had been put in there with her mother, and she survived somehow. And the kids she gave her story and all, but the kids were asking her questions. And somebody said, you know, when you laid down at night to go to sleep, did you dream about going home, or your friends, or your family, or everything that you missed? And she said, no. She said, I actually dreamed about food. She said it became apparent quite quickly that we were going to be not given enough food to survive. And she said we were just given enough to keep us alive, to keep us kind of working, but not enough to thrive. And she said quickly our bodies started going into malnutrition. And she said when your bodies go into malnutrition, they start craving the vitamins and all that they're lacking. So your body just naturally starts craving foods that would supply these vitamins. But she would lay there at night and think about things like tomatoes, she said. And she would think about melons. And when she said that, that's why I remember her story so much, because I remember when I was pregnant with my first child, I craved melons all the time, and I didn't know why. I was craving specifically honeydew melons, which was not something I had grown up eating, and really, I don't even know if I'd ever eaten one. But all of a sudden, I was craving honeydew melons. And I heard later somewhere that pregnant women do that. They'll crave things because it's showing that your body is lacking some vitamins. So I was doing that. It was a physical thing that I remember. And so when she was talking about how she couldn't even sleep sometimes because all she could think about was vegetables, that hit me. And I thought, how sad that you can be so hungry that as a young woman, all you're thinking about is food and wishing somebody would walk in and hand you a tomato. How sad that is. And I was also thinking, kind of compare and contrast that with our mentality sometimes to say, well, we don't like this, and we don't eat greens, nobody in my family eats greens, therefore I'm not growing any greens. I get it. I hear that a lot. I even hear a lot of content creators saying, don't grow foods you don't eat. If your kids don't like it, and on, don't grow it. And I get that too. I do understand the mentality behind saying that. Why put your energy, which is so finite, into growing something that everybody in your family might hate? So yes, there may be certain vegetables you don't want to grow because you can't bear it. Your husband can't bear it, your kids can't bear it, so why grow it, But I would ask everybody to keep an open mind, because most of us have never been so hungry that we've laid in bed at night thinking about a tomato or a melon. We've never been that hungry. What would we do if we were that hungry? What would we do if our body was craving certain foods because our body was being starved of those vitamins? I'm not saying that everything might devolve into a situation to where people, your average everyday people, are starving, but it might. And it could happen quickly depending on your circumstance. It doesn't mean that everybody in your town's starving. It doesn't mean that everybody has lost everything around you, but it could mean that you have. If all of your investments lost half their value tomorrow, your house loses half its investment, so you can't sell it because you would not come out even, you would owe money on it. Your 401k, all of a sudden, that you were counting on retiring on in the next 5-10 years, is all of a sudden half what it used to be, and it's not going to be enough to retire now. What would you do? How all of a sudden, if on top of that you were whammed with being laid off and your income cut off, how would you deal with it? How would you deal with it? Would you have enough food to last you a long, long time? Would you have enough food that will provide vitamins to you? Not just get you by like cereal boxes, but would provide vitamins to you. And I think that as the new year rolls around and as you're getting ready to plan your spring garden, do put a little bit of time into thinking about things and thinking about, what does this food give me? I'm putting my energy into growing this food. Now, what does it give me? And some foods give a lot. Some foods don't. But try to think about, if tomorrow our income was gone, if tomorrow everything we knew was kind of falling apart in our country and our finances, and we might even be having to take other people into our home, our kids and their families, our parents, whatever your situation is. If it's a situation where everybody wants to feel more secure and everybody wants to kind of maybe come together in a compound type situation, and you're going to have more people around than just your family who hates these certain vegetables, but you're going to have others too, are there things you could grow that maybe aren't at the top of your list? It's maybe not everybody's favorite, but that could do the job of feeding people, feeding family that may come stay with you, feeding neighbors that may need help, feeding yourself, and giving you vitamins that will keep you and your children, whose bodies need these vitamins. Kids need all these vitamins. They don't know they need them, but we need to know they need them. And they can't exist very long on sugary snacks and juicy drinks. They need good food. And when their body starts lacking those vitamins, they might eat some of those foods that they didn't like before. You might eat some of those foods you didn't like before. And so it just hit me as I was harvesting all these greens, which really did not require hardly any work. I put the seeds in the ground. They came up. I had put a little bit of fertilizer under my beds, some 8-24-24, but my seeds came up. They've been growing. We had a lack of rain there for a little while, and then we got some rain a few weeks ago, and they kind of sprang forth after that rain, and they're doing good. But I haven't had to do anything. They've just grown. They didn't cost me a lot of energy. They've just grown. The most energy I'm going to spend is picking them and processing them. But that's with any vegetable. So if you can grow something like that that didn't cost you a lot of energy to put in and to grow, and when you harvest it, you can harvest a vegetable that will just give your vitamins and all a kick in the right direction. Maybe you need to think about putting some things like that in. I'm growing these in the fall, but you can grow all of these greens in the spring too. They can be planted fairly early, earlier than other things. Like kale and everything could be planted very early, kohlrabi, and you can grow those greens, and you could end up with a whole spring harvest of them too, not counting the tops of some of your plants that you can grow. So I wanted you to think about that. And I looked online a while ago, and I just wanted to kind of look up to give you an idea of what vitamins and all that leafy greens, they just basically throw them in a big pile and call them leafy greens. But what vitamins do they provide, and how can they help you? And even I was shocked. I thought it was going to list just a few vitamins, but I was shocked. And the amount that you need is not a whole lot. Half a cup per week for kids, 1.5 cups per week for adults. And that is a whole lot better than some of these 2 and 3 servings a day recommendations that you hear on some things, like fruits and all. If you can eat 1.5 cups of leafy greens per week, if you're an adult, and get this list of vitamins, you've done something, and your body will appreciate it. Let me just tell you, leafy greens, including Chinese cabbage and everything else that I've talked about today, supply vitamin A, vitamin C, antioxidants, fiber, folate, vitamin K, which I looked it up to see what vitamin K is all about. And vitamin K builds bones and helps your blood clot. And it can also help prevent heart disease. So that's important. These greens also supply magnesium, calcium, iron, and potassium. Leafy greens are doing a lot of work. They're doing a lot of work. And I want to also throw out in there that they're cheap. They're cheap to grow. The seeds are cheap. I brought a packet. This is tender green mustard green seeds. This is a small packet from my co-op, but it has a ton of seeds in there. And if you can see that really good, but it's a ton of seeds in there. This right here could plant enough with half of a pack to have a ton of greens in the spring, and the other half of the pack could grow in the fall. And this pack was $1.25. You see where it's written there, $1.25. For $1.25 to be able to plant mustard greens that don't require hardly anything to grow is a deal. Really, only half of this amount could be planted, like I said, for one growing season. Plant the other half later. So you're talking about less than $1 to plant something in the spring that could give you a lot of bulk and to provide all of these things that I listed that would keep you nourished. There's a lot of vegetables I could do a show on like this. You could do a show on carrots and the beta carotene type things, which are important too. And they're cheap. Those seeds are cheap. So all of it together, if you put it all together and look and just start not only studying seed prices and what variety you want and which ones are disease resistant and all of that stuff, but just start really looking at what they provide for you. And it could turn out that these little $1.25 seeds, because the collards and everything, they're the same price, 7 top turnip greens, all of them. It could turn out that these little dollar seed packets from your co-op could be the difference between life and death, between your body entering into malnutrition because of lack of food to thriving. Maybe not even just surviving, but thriving. And feeling, when your body feels full, it's because I'm not talking about once you've eaten a meal, that kind of full. I'm talking about satisfied. When your body feels satisfied, usually it's because it has achieved the vitamins and the nutrition that it needs. But I had one more little story that I wanted to share with you. I have shared several little snippets from the Laura Ingalls books because I grew up loving those books. And I think God kind of gave me those books to love as a child. And because I tend to internalize things better with stories. I tend to, if there's a story attached to a Bible lesson or something, I tend to remember that Bible lesson more because of the stories. And those Laura Ingalls books were those stories for me. I could see them living out like things in the Bible and everything, and going through the trials of their life, but living out what they knew God wanted them to do. And so I've always tried to kind of be a good person because I know that they went through things so much harder than me, and yet they stayed that course and stayed faithful to God and all. And so it was always a big inspiration for me. I just always loved the Laura Ingalls books. And in relation to these greens that I was picking the other day, I started thinking about a story from The Long Winter. And any of you who have read Laura Ingalls books, I'm sure you've read The Long Winter. It's where they had 7 months of blizzards. An Indian had predicted it. People in town didn't believe it. But Pa said, you know what? Guess what he said? He said, you know what? I'd rather be prepared and find out that Indian was right than to be not prepared and find out he was right. That's not a quote from the book, but that's what he did. People in town kind of laughed it off, and Pa said, no, you know what, we're going to shut down our shanty out here on the prairie that's only got tar paper around it and is not very secure, and we're going to move into town. So that's what he did, because he heard those warnings, and he was standing with a group of people who heard the same thing, and some of them laughed it off. But Pa said, you know what, I'm in charge of my family, and I've got 4 daughters and a wife. And if this man is right, if this Indian that's standing here in this store telling us all this is right, I better be prepared. And I kind of feel that same way is what I'm trying to convey to you. I've got to be prepared. I'm in charge of this property and this family now. And I'm hearing things that disturb me, so I need to be prepared. So anyway, Pa and them moved into town, and the storms started, well, they started right before they moved into town, but they started. And they figured, well, this can't last forever. Well, it did. It lasted all the way to April. And then what happened was, even though the storms stopped at the beginning of April, they had caused so much damage, and so many trains had been snowed in and then packed in with mud and snow all mixed together, to the point to where people were having to literally take pickaxes to dig out trains so that these trains could get on through to the people out in the west to bring supplies. And the people out in the west, which was where they were in North Dakota and the Dakota territories, they couldn't just get in a wagon and go back east and get supplies and bring them back to the people, because after the snow stopped, the rain started. And it rained and it rained and it rained, these spring rains, and the whole Dakota territories kind of became like a lake. All the roads became like lakes. So they couldn't get out to get food, and food couldn't get in. So they had almost starved to death waiting for the storms to stop. And then they thought, yay, once they stopped, trains are coming. Well, then the trains didn't come for about 6 more weeks. And they had nothing. Everybody in the town had nothing. All they had left was a little sack of wheat and that's all they had left. And so they literally were making little biscuits and bread just to get by until the trains could come. And that started running out. That sack was about on the floor empty. And Mom mentioned that she had been looking around for greens in the yard to eat. And she asked Pa, are there any greens out at the shanty that we could pick? And he said no. And Ma said, well, I'm looking for weeds in the yard, but none of them seemed big enough to pick. So there was nothing she could cook, is basically what she was saying. There was nothing she could cook. And so that was it. Luckily, the very day that their biscuits ran out, a train came and brought a few things. So what I'm trying to convey is they went through a hard time, but then it was a while before things got better, so it was still a hard time for them. It was unexpected. They were not prepared for the food shortage because they were in a new country and they had not grown a lot of things. They had only grown a few potatoes and some turnips and things, and that got them through a good bit of the winter, but not the whole winter. And then this wheat that they were able to get a hold of got them through the last of the winter, but then there was nothing. And then I think to myself, you know, even when they went back out to their farm to live again, I'm sure they were happy as they could be. But at this point, it was the end of May. They lived in the Dakota territories in the northern part of the United States. How long of a growing season did they have? And then you still have to plant those seeds and wait for them to grow. Probably all they had was whatever they could get off of those grocery shelves from those few little trains that were coming through right at the end. And they probably had a long winter ahead too of just eating things made out of flour and all from the store. Not really any green vegetables. I'm sure it was probably until the next spring garden produced towards the summer that they really started being able to eat good again. So that's scary. That's 1 year all through the next year to the next summer before they were able to eat good again. And their stores in their town during all that emptied out of everything, bare shelves, and there was nothing. When times are tough, that's what happens sometimes. Things go down to nothing. Things you've depended on. You depended on these merchants to always have something, and all of a sudden it's not there. So what would you do if a situation like that started happening in 2024? What would you do if financially things started really going bad? What would you do? I would say just plant whatever you can, whatever seeds you can kind of get a hold of at a good price. Don't overpay $4 a pack for 50 mustard green seeds, please. You can go to your local co-ops and get them a lot cheaper than that. You can let them go to seed and save your seeds for the year after that. Do whatever you can to not overspend on all these seeds. That's why I don't do a lot of seed haul videos or anything. I love seeds, but I'm also trying to get good deals on them and good prices. So you'll see me a lot more talk about my co-op seeds than anything. Try to just get bang for your buck so that you can put vitamins in your pantry, so that you can be able to feed those needs inside your bodies. Your kids are going to start craving certain things when they don't have a lot to eat. And you need to be able to feed those vitamin needs in their body. And there probably will be a lot more open to eating those kind of things if there's nothing else around. If all the little sugary snacks have gone away, if all the peanut butter's eaten up and everything, they'll be more open to eating whatever vegetables Mom and Dad can pull out of the yard. And I think you need to keep your mind open and don't necessarily nix something just because you don't eat it. If your kids aren't walking around munching on a carrot, that's okay. They might do that later. And it might be that you could figure out how to cook those carrots in a certain way that would make them want to eat them. I know I don't just go boil mustard greens and eat them. I love salt in them. I love to blanch them for about 5 minutes, drain them, and then I love to heat up a little bacon grease and put them in the bacon grease and let them cook that way. And it's even better if you have some type of little bacon or salt pork or something like that, you can cook with them a little piece of meat. You know, they need flavor. Everything needs some flavor. But probably if you served them something like that, a little salt pork with some greens and a little bacon grease, and it's salty enough, and if you can have some cornbread or something with it, they'll eat that. They'll be happy to eat that. Don't ever get so filled up with what we want to where you forget what your body might need in a bad time. Your body will need vitamins. So make sure to grow things that'll give you a good supply of those vitamins. Make sure if you have money to spend on items to stock your pantry, that you're spending it on things that will benefit your family, even in the worst of times. I hope this year is fabulous. I hope we thrive. I hope the United States of America just rises up and redeems itself and becomes the nation that we should be, that we could be, that we were destined to be. I really hope that. I hope for everyone for it to just be the best year ever. I really do. But always remember that you're in charge of your family. And the what ifs should bother you a little bit. The what ifs should cause you to do some planning and should cause you to think, okay, worst case scenario, what do we need? And think about the stories I just told about the Holocaust survivor who dreamed of tomatoes. She needed vitamins. She needed food. Think about the Ingalls family. 6 people trying to survive being starved out in a small town in the Dakota Territories in the middle of nowhere. They needed food. They needed vitamins. This is Lainey from Hilltop Home Place. I appreciate you joining me. I know it's been a long video, but I just wanted to talk about these things and kind of get it off of my chest. And I hope that I've kind of inspired you and lit a fire under you to this spring really start putting a lot of things in the ground, whether it's your favorite things or whether it's just things that could sustain you and help your neighbors and friends. If you don't love it, I guarantee you can find somebody that lives around you that loves it. There are people that love greens and pay good money for them at the store. So if you grow them, you may be able to help a lot of people, even if you may not ever eat them yourself. I'm going to give you an update in a little bit when I go in on how many pints I was able to get out of that 2-gallon jumbo freezer bag of greens. I've got the other one that I've got to can tonight. So I'll end up with a whole lot just from that, and I haven't even begun to harvest the other stuff. I just can't describe to you how I feel to have something come out of my garden like that and then just end up with a cabinet full of jars. It's the best feeling in the world to know you have done it and you have put up this food for your family. I thank you so much for joining me. I hope everybody stays free in 2024 and that it is a great year. That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're praying for. Thank you so much. Y'all have a great day. Bye-bye. Just for reference, a 2-gallon Ziploc bag full of greens that I washed really, really good. I chopped the stems out of them and then I cut them into little julienne strips. A 2-gallon bag made 9 pints of finished pressure canned greens. I'm very happy with that because my canner holds 9 pints, so I didn't waste any space. I've got to go ahead and can this batch in a little bit. That'll be 9 more. That'll be 18 pints. And then I'm already picking for my future batches. So this is a great thing to do to stock your pantry and to get yourself prepared and have a lot of vitamins and bulk and good food in your pantry. Y'all have a Merry Christmas. Bye-bye.